Remarks about the business of the day by saying that we are having two of our staff on my side who are moving on to other assignments. Alexandra Gelber is here with her family. She was a detailee from the Department of Justice with special expertise in the area of CSAM and related issues. We're going to miss her. She's an extraordinarily talented person, and we wish her the best at the department. Nicole Walton is moving to HHS in the General Counsel Office. Nicole, thank you for your service to our staff, and I wish you the very best in your new undertaking. We have several items on today's agenda. As you may know, Senator Butler is at home recovering from COVID. We wish her well. Hope she returns soon. In the meantime, we'll hold over for the 5 judicial nominees and vote on them at a later date. Today, we're going to vote on S-4199, the Bipartisan Judges Act, sponsored by Senators Young and Coons, and by 6 other senators, including from this committee, Padilla, Cruz, Hirono, and Tillis. I'll reserve my comments on the bill till we turn to it. With that, I turn to the ranking member, Graham, for any opening remarks before we move our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll talk about the bill in a moment. I wrote a letter yesterday to Senator Schumer and McConnell asking that the Senate be given a briefing about the terrorism threat that we're facing, people coming across the border. There was a pretty high-profile sting operation involving 8 people from Tajikistan that were able to get into our country, released into the country. Clearly, the vetting was insufficient at the time. From my understanding of what's going on, this is a very dangerous situation for our country. We need to be told about the extent of the danger and what kind of corrective action we can take. So I would urge the majority leader and the minority leader not to let a lot of time pass before you share with this committee, this Senate, all of us, the threats we face as a nation. I fear that the sting operation involving 8 people from Tajikistan is just the tip of the iceberg. As to the Inspector General report from DHS about vetting, all I can say is that catch, release, and poorly vet is not the way to go. We're learning more and more that the vetting system comes after people have been released, not before, and it's insufficient. So the number of people released into our country is astounding. It seems to be the system is failing in terms of vetting. So I am hopeful that the administration will take this report from the DHS Inspector General and take it to heart and make reforms. Don't let people into the country until they've been fully vetted. Stop abusing parole. At the end of the day, the parole system in this country has been abused. The bipartisan bill that we all talk about, in my view, did very little, if anything, to change that. And the Lake and Raleigh tragedy is a good example of where the person accused of murdering this young lady was paroled into the country not based on the 2 statutory factors in law, but based on lack of detention capacity. So this is a nightmare for our country. The process is continuing. The DHS inspector report is a wake-up call. The sting operation by ICE and other law enforcement investigation is beyond a wake-up call. So I'm hoping that the Senate will be briefed about the extent of the danger and that we will be able to make some corrective action before it's too late. Yesterday, Mr. Chairman, you asked unanimous consent for a bill coming from the House involving deep fakes, manipulating, particularly against young women, prominent people, just people in general, how you can have their lives turned upside down by technology that is incredibly harmful, stripping people not only of their clothes but their dignity. We had an objection on the floor. I've made unanimous consent requests for CSAM and the Earn It Act. We've had objections on the floor. The senator who objected, I respect her very, very much. She thinks the legislation coming from the House is too broad. Let's sit down and talk and see if we can have a meeting of the minds. don't come to the floor and object unless you're really willing to work with us. Because I am fully with you here, Mr. Chairman. I support what you tried to do yesterday. I think your response to the objection was absolutely accurate, and I hope in a bipartisan fashion the members of this committee that have led the way on social media reform, that every week between now and the election and beyond, we will go to the floor, ask unanimous consent to bring up bills that this committee passed unanimously that would dramatically improve the lives of the American people before this is too late. So I want to continue to work with you on this journey.
Senator Graham, thank you. The bill we brought up yesterday on the floor is a bipartisan undertaking, which both of us have co-sponsored, along with many of the other bills. I think they are entirely reasonable, and if a member of any one of our families had been victimized, as the people have who brought this matter to our attention, I think there would be a different attitude toward all senators and a sense of urgency in what we do. I was surprised at yesterday's objection. What we were trying to protect people from is an outrage and an exploitation of children and women in particular. I agree with you completely. We are ready to sit down with any member in good faith and talk about changes that might be made to improve this legislation. We are going to approach the senator from Wyoming on a bipartisan basis and find out what her concerns are and if we can resolve them. But this is a matter of urgency, immediacy, and justice. The same thing is true for CSAM and the other bills that we passed out of here unanimously. As I said at the time, and at the risk of jeopardizing our situation, I can repeat, this is one of the most diverse committees on Capitol Hill. You will find the full political spectrum from right to left here, and we passed these bills unanimously, which ought to be a signal to all our colleagues that there is some merit to these pieces of legislation. We're going to continue to come to the floor on a bipartisan basis and request that they be taken up immediately. So thank you for raising that point. You raised two other very important points, and one, I want to go on the record and tell you that we, like you, have reached out to the administration for details on this incident. The FBI and DHS have confirmed that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested 8 individuals from Tajikistan with suspected ties to ISIS-K between June 8th and 11th. News reports state that the individuals entered the United States via the southwest border in 2023 and 2024, and at least 2 entered through appointments scheduled with the CBP One app. They were screened at the border, but at the time the government had no information suggesting that they were a public safety or national security threat. Reportedly, the FBI closely monitored the group for months, and the ICE arrested them on immigration charges. They have not yet been criminally charged. I want to know more about it, as you do too. It'll be a bipartisan inquiry in that regard. In terms of what we can and should do, I know you disagree because you said as much, but I believe the bipartisan legislation with Senator Langford and Senator Murphy and Senator from Arizona was a step in the right direction and could have been the basis for even more resources at the border to keep us safe. That's why the Border Patrol Union endorsed the legislation. I'm sorry that the decision was made at the highest levels of the other party to stop any effort to pass this bipartisan measure. We should return to it. I hope we do soon. Today we will consider S 4199, the Judges Act, which would authorize 63 new permanent district court judgeships, 3 new temporary district court judgeships. The bill is based on the March 2023 recommendations of the Judicial Conference of the United States, which asked Congress to create new judgeships to meet workload demands in certain courts. Pursuant to a manager's amendment that I understand will be offered, these new judgeships would be created over the next 12 years, allowing us to effectively respond to our judiciary's needs without giving any advantage to one party or one single president. Notably, Congress has not created a new district court judgeship since 2003, and it's not enacted comprehensive judgeship legislation since 1990. I support this legislation to strengthen our judiciary. I encourage my colleagues to join me. I also want to make special commendation to Senators Young and Coons, a bipartisan team that's been working in a manner to incorporate suggestions made by committee members. Their efforts have greatly improved the bill. and I hope their work will be rewarded with a strong bipartisan vote. I will now turn to Senator Coons to see if he'd like to make remarks and offer his manager's amendment. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I'd like to call up the manager's amendment to the Judges Act and make brief remarks, if I might. I am thrilled that we are here for committee markup and vote today. As you mentioned, I've worked with Senator Young of Indiana on this bill for a long time. Our federal courts are in a genuine crisis of workload. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, not since 1990 have we added any significant amount of new federal judges. And since then, our nation has added 100 million people. Federal filings have increased 40%, and the weighted case average across our nation is 550 cases per judge. This is particularly acute in my home state and home district. It is not sustainable and is taking a major toll on new judges. This was made particularly acute to me when a lifelong personal friend finally was seated as a federal district court judge in the Eastern District and was immediately crushed by the burden of that caseload. Anyone who is a professional who intends to carry out their obligations quickly discovers that managing anything like a 500 or 600 caseload is not manageable. This isn't a red state issue or a blue state issue. It's an access to justice issue. The Judges Act, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, will bolster our federal judiciary by creating 66 new judges across 25 districts, across 13 states. These selections were in no way political or random. They were based on the recommendations of the Judicial Conference, led by Chief Justice Roberts and 25 other federal judges. They determined these districts. This manager's amendment would break it from 3 tranches into 6 across 3 different administrations across a dozen years. I want to thank Senators Young, Padilla, Hirono, Cruz, Tillis, Lujan, and Lankford for their original and bipartisan co-sponsorship. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and Ranking Member Graham and your staff for working closely with us to improve this bill. Your changes have made this bill stronger, and this is what legislating is about, finding places to work together for the greater good of our nation. We can do something today that hasn't been done in a generation and give our federal courts the resources they need to effectively deliver justice to our public. I hope everyone will support this bill today and that we can swiftly move it through the Senate and the House before this election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I recognize several of your colleagues who seek recognition, do you want to offer the manager's amendment?
I move the adoption of the manager's amendment.
All those
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Senator Graham.
All those in favor of the manager's amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The manager's amendment is adopted. We have recognition sought by Senator Whitehouse and Senator Blumenthal. I'll go back and forth. Senator Grassley and Cornyn as well. Start with Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to support this bill. I like Chris and Todd. I admire the work that they have done to move this forward. But before I can support it on the floor, I want to hear from my friends from Texas a little bit of an explanation of why it is that Texas needs additional judge slots while 5 vacancies have been kept open in Texas. So I'm for this, but on the theory that if it's really that urgent, why are there so many vacancies? That's a conversation I think we should have before the bill comes to the floor. So heads up to my friend John Cornyn.
Senator Grassley.
I think most of the members of this committee probably don't know of my opposition to asking or giving more judges, but I'm going to vote for this bill. But before I give you my explanation of voting for it, I just think all of you should know why I've been standing in the way of some of these permanent positions. I haven't stood in the way too much of temporary judges, but I've had questions about how the Judicial Conference allotment works out and haven't been satisfied. I think this bill will help us in that direction. I haven't been satisfied that every senior judge is working hard, and if they aren't doing a certain amount of work, then we're expending a lot of money on staff that they have and clerks that they have. What I have studied about the 93 or 92 district judges, or I should say their districts. Some of them are not working very hard, and others are way overloaded with the work that they have to do and the number of cases. And I thought there ought to be some way that we could, by moving judges either permanently or on a temporary basis from some district to another district to help that out, would be a partial solution to the problem. And then, of course, we always put in temporary judges. But after the years of having these concerns about whether we ought to put on more judges or not, I still gotta say that the people of this country are entitled to justice, and justice is a speedy process, and when that's slowed down, it's not really justice. So those are the concerns that I've had until now, and I suppose I still have some of those concerns, but I think this bill will help with some of these concerns. First, I'd like to note for the record that even with changes, I still think this bill creates too many new judgeships. So many, in fact, that it'll end up being the largest omni-judge bill at the district level in more than 45 years if it becomes law. Nevertheless, my office has diligently worked with many of your offices in an attempt to improve this bill, something I think that we've achieved. So if you want to know why I've changed my mind on it, it's because of the collegiality of people on this committee that was really willing to look for some changes in the bill. With these changes, this bill will now more thoughtfully and deliberately create new judgeships incrementally in 6 tranches spread out over 12 years. Given the large amount of judges, this is much more reasonable and manageable pace for our judiciary. This bill will now also improve transparency by evaluating judicial caseloads and the method by which future judgeship recommendations are offered. This is achieved in part by having the administrative office of the courts post the biennial judgeship recommendation reports online where it can be assessed by the public. This bill will also direct the Government Accountability Office to evaluate factors that may impact judicial caseloads and future judgeship recommendations. In particular, the GAO will look at judgeship methodology for the first time in over a decade, as well as the impact of the non-case time on overall judicial caseloads and the utilization of senior judges within our courts. I'm hopeful that these efforts will ensure that judicial administration is efficient and effective. Additionally, these measures will help dispel some of the intrigue underlying these judgeship recommendations in the future. While this bill isn't perfect and it does not have everything that I would have wanted, it is a much improved bill. Given these changes and the good faith effort of our colleagues, as I've said twice already, I'm voting for this bill. Before I yield back, I'd like to thank in particular Senator Young and Ranking Member Graham and their staff's hard work on this bill. I'd also like to thank Chairman Durbin and Senator Coons and their teams for their work on this bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Senator Blumenthal?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to join in thanking Senators Coons and Young and all of our colleagues. I asked to be added as a co-sponsor if there's no objection, Mr. Chairman. And
Without objection.
I want to point out some practical considerations here for all of us who have litigated in federal court. We have been frustrated on more than one occasion by delays. I can remember waiting literally years for a decision from a district court judge, and there is nothing anyone can do, literally anyone can do, other than seeking mandamus from the Circuit Court of Appeals, which is, I think, close to a death sentence for any litigator in terms of what the reaction of the district judge will be. So we have to recognize that there are delays, that they are frustrating, and they are costly. This is not about giving judges a break or creating a bigger bureaucracy. It is about achieving swifter, more expeditious justice. And the numbers of cases have risen, but the numbers of judges have not. And that is a recipe for unfairness and injustice in our system and costs to the litigants, whether they are companies or individuals who are simply seeking a decision. And often the lack of a decision itself may be costly to one side or another. And I just want to point out one last fact here. We had a very, I think, interesting back and forth yesterday, Mr. Chairman, on the proposal for a judicial code of ethics for the United States Supreme Court. There was a lot of talk about the independence of the judiciary. This kind of measure, coming from Congress, obviously sets resources for the judiciary. That's our proper role. And we also have a responsibility for accountability in some measure when we create those judgeships, which is why we have the Judicial Conference, which we have also created. And they have a rule of a judicial code of conduct for the judiciary, that is all judges except for the United States Supreme Court. So I think we're fulfilling our responsibility here to an independent judiciary by giving them the resources they need to do the job. Thanks.
Senator Cornyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by addressing Senator Whitehouse's question. Why does Texas need more judges when there are vacancies currently existing? Just like to remind everybody, Chairman, you know this very well because you've actually complimented Senator Cruz and I on our Federal Judicial Evaluation Committee for filling 3 district judgeships and the Fifth Circuit on a cooperative basis with the
Senator Cornyn, it was a weak moment.
It was. Well, I didn't know how long it would last. It was effervescent, I guess you'd have to say. But we've also interviewed people for the McAllen vacancy, but been able to not yet achieve consensus with the White House. The point is, we've been doing it in a cooperative, bipartisan way. We happen to be a big state with a number of vacancies. We're going to continue to work in good faith with the administration and this committee to try to fill these vacancies. I don't think that's not controversial in my view. So I too want to thank Senator Coons and Senator Young for their leadership on this. I know Senator Cruz has been involved in this legislation as well. We're dealing with a large number of cases, and guess what? A lot of these are immigration cases along the border due to the unprecedented influx of migrants across the border and cases that need to be litigated by the border courts. I'm going to, like Senator Grassley, support this bill with some caveats. My support's based on the understanding that vacancies on Texas courts will be continued to be filled by Texas senators working with the White House to nominate qualified individuals. What I'm alluding to, of course, is the blue slip, which ensures we get the very best and the brightest, and Senator Cruz and I work hard to advise and consent on Texas nominations. We do that whether there's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House. We're proud of the judges that we have recommended through this process, and we'll continue to do that, as I said. Some have called on Senator Durbin to eliminate the blue slip, which would be a huge mistake. If you learn one thing after serving in the Senate for a while, it's what goes around comes around, and frequently you rue the day that you begin to cut corners and break the rules. The blue slip is an important institution, and I do appreciate Mr. Chairman, your willingness to stand strong on preserving the blue slip, again, based on the understanding that we're going to work with you and the White House and on a bipartisan basis to fill these vacancies in an orderly basis, in a deliberative fashion. So my support today for this bill is based on the understanding the blue slip will continue to be the tradition of this body. It's also based on the understanding that the Judicial Conference will stay in its lane. And what I mean by that the Judicial Conference doesn't have the authority to legislate. Recently, the Judicial Conference stopped short of issuing mandatory policy that would change how Texas courts assign their cases. They did this after getting a letter from the Majority Leader who's taken a recent interest in how Texas courts function. Majority Leader thinks he knows what is best for Texas courts and how they manage their dockets, and he believes he should be the one to determine how they should assign cases. The letter he sent to the Judicial Conference to that end, in response to that letter, the Judicial Conference convened a committee and issued a proposal that, of course, was not binding, was merely guidance, but it embraced the Majority Leader's preferred scheme for assigning cases. Of course, the Judicial Conference glossed over the fact that Congress writes the law, not them, and that the current law gives the judges in those respective districts the authority to assign cases as they see fit. It's come to my attention that the Judicial Conference is at it again, and so I have serious concern about whether they will continue to engage in an attempt to legislate and usurp the prerogatives of the Congress. Decisions on how cases are assigned are vested with Texas judges, and the current proposal today was done in consultation with the Judicial Conference, which is what they want, more judges. And I agree that this is a necessary and laudable goal, and I'm prepared to support this goal at this juncture. But if they continue to legislate through their shadow committees, then I am going to have issues with this bill and others that they may want moving forward. Thank you very much.
I might note for the record the Judicial Conference is chaired by the Chief Justice, John Roberts. So
what?
You're arguing that he has a political agenda that you disagree with?
No, Democrats have a political agenda by trying to force a code of ethics on an independent branch of government, the judiciary. So I understand that political agenda, but we're going to fight that one, and we'll fight the agenda of the Majority Leader in trying to dictate how Texas courts assign cases.
Establishing an enforceable code of ethics for the highest court of the land, I don't believe is a partisan matter. It affects justices appointed by Democrats as well as Republicans.
I disagree,
Are there any
Mr.
other
Chairman.
comments or amendments to the pending legislation?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Graham.
the discussion of this bipartisan bill has been very interesting. So, in 1990, the number one movie was Home Alone. In 1990, the number one song was Hold On by Wilson and Phillips. That's the last time we've actually had new judges. So, to all the members of this committee, thank you for having input. Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, thank you very much for being able.
Is there a chance Senator Graham's going to sing a few bars?
Freezing in hell is a better chance. So,
Senator Graham, I just want to correct you, sir. You were one of the hippest, coolest senators there is, but it's Wilson Phillips, not Wilson and Phillips.
okay, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you. To those people, I hope you still get residuals. So the bottom line is I've never seen the committee work together more collaboratively. And to Senator Young and Coons, I thought this thing was going nowhere. And you've worked with Representative Grassley. You've been very strong in your opinion, but very reasonable in trying to get to yes. I just think we need more judges. It's been since 1990. We didn't pull these numbers out of a hat. Somebody thought about it. Kind of makes sense. And I share Senator Cornyn's concerns. But 1990's been a long time. There are a lot more people today than there were in 1990, and I'm glad we're making progress.
If there are no further amendments to come before the committee, the clerk will call the roll on S 4199.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Hronos.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Booker. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Welch. Ms. Butler.
See no indication. Go ahead.
Mr. Graham.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cruz. Mr. Hawley.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn.
Aye by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, on this vote, the ayes are 20.
The bill will be favorably reported to the floor, and for the record, I'll repeat that Senator Butler is absent because of COVID. We understand that situation. If there's no further business to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee, it stands adjourned.